Good morning, Jessie James Beads lovelies. How are you today? I hope you're having a beautiful day no matter what it is you've been doing so far, or if you've just got up, I hope that your entire day is absolutely wonderful. We have a very special make-along class today here on the Jessie James Beads Facebook page for you. If you have got in hand your Soul of the Ocean kit, then let's get ready to create together. Whilst we're waiting for everybody to just join us, I want to show you what it is we're going to create together today, and hopefully we're going to have lots of fun. So this is the piece that we're going to work up together today. So if you pre-ordered in advance your Soul of the Ocean kit, you will have got findings. You've got chain, you've got a clasp, you have got a multitude of beads to work with. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the beads in a second, but I just wanted to show you this is the main piece that we're going to work together today. And these are all over from my kit, so you could go for a completely beaded necklace if you prefer. I quite like having the beads down at the front and then chain towards the back. So the kit included some of that beautiful chain, complete with a gorgeous heavyweight clasp, which is very, very reminiscent of the fob spinner style design that we're going to work up together today. What have you been up to? Give me a quick hello. Let me know that you are indeed there. It'd be lovely to see your faces, if not in actual person, then out there in the ether. So it's just gone 5 PM here in the United Kingdom, and I'm getting ready to share with you the Soul of the Ocean kit. I hope that you've had a good day so far and that things are going swimmingly. What's new? What have you been up to? I'm just going to pop you back to say hello. Our Celia is in. Good afternoon from a cold Lancashire. It's quite nippy here, my love, but it's sunny, so I'm happy. Anne is in from California. I was hacked in somebody with using my picture and asking Jem a question. She has mentioned several times, sorry that happened. Do not worry, my lovely. It is not a problem. We have just not even thought about it. Hello from India. Hello from Alina Diaz. Hello, my darling sunflowers. Absolutely on my mind right now too. Let me just get up here and say hello. I'm going to send you all a great big squishy heart-shaped hug. If that's even possible. I mean, I don't know. If you've pre-ordered and received your beautiful kit, I want to talk to you about some of the gemstones. I'm going to show them to you, but I want to talk about them. I do occasionally talk to them. Shh, don't tell anybody, you'll all think I'm bonkers. So we have got some Terra agate, which is the focal bead, which is that beautiful spinner we're going to work into the heart and soul of this design. We've also got some really quite large aquamarine faceted nuggets. They're described as faceted nuggets, but they're absolutely impressive beads. We've got Amazonite, we've got blue lace, and we've got angelite, and that's just the gemstone beads to start with. A multitude of crystals, a multitude of spacers. Got some incredibly textured spacers in there as well, which I adore. I love it when I'm working with a silver metal which has the low lights in it. It's like it's been oxidized, and then you get to see so much more of that texture. I'm going to drop you back down to the board now, and let's have another look at what we're going to make together. So there we are. Hello from West Virginia. Hello from Tampa, where it's 80 degrees. I am slightly jealous, Teresa. Bonnie is in from Arizona. Hey, Jem from Arkansas in the USA. And that's from Mick. Hello to you, and thank you for your kind comments the other day. Much appreciated. So this is the beautiful Terra Jasper that we're going to work with today. There are a couple of different varieties of this stone. So you may have one that's got a little bit more purple to it. You may have one which is this gorgeous turquoise oceanic colour. What is common to all of these is the impressive drill hole that, trust me, you do not get in every gemstone bead. So whichever one you choose to work with, whichever one you've received, they're both really, really beautiful. And it's an endlessly fascinating gemstone. So we're going to work with that as our fob centre. And it's a spinning design. So if you feel the urge to make that and then sit there and turn it all the time, you absolutely can. We're going to highlight our focal bead with a selection of stones. We've got some spacers for either side and some blue crystal, as well as a couple of Tigi Angelites on the side. I think they're 4mm, but I can't actually put hand on heart and say. And I've chosen a couple of different spaces. Now, because you've got quite a few to choose from, you can absolutely, completely create this in your own vision. So I'm just going to pop this one out of the way for a moment, because this is the heart and soul of the ocean. We've got a couple more to create the drop down at the bottom here. And then we've got a length of chain. I've put aside a couple of spaces because towards the end of our make along together today, I want to show you how you can extend a length of chain if you need something just a little bit longer. It's a basic rosary link, but if you've never seen one before, it can add an extra inch when you're just using 2 teeny beads. And these are the most sumptuous toggle and bar components. Really, really gorgeous. Nicely textured, nicely coloured, brilliant finish to them. Those are fabulous. So that's another part that we get to work with later. So I'm going to pop that out of the way before I knock it on the floor. Now what I've done here is I've put aside one set of the beads as I used on one side. And the other set I've already pre-threaded, just so that you can see what that order is. If you want to sort the beads into the order that I have used, I'm just going to leave that along the side so you can see what they are. Maybe it's clearer up at the top. Let's just put it there for a minute. So don't worry about the wire that's running up the centre. It's just in case, whilst I'm having a bit of a chat, if you want to get your beads into order, you absolutely can. I know some people, when they're doing a make-along, much prefer to be organised in that way. So you would need 2 lots of these beads. One that I've pre-threaded and one just in the bowl, and I'll show you how to create that component part later. So that has cleared the board a little bit. Let's have another look at what we're going to make, and I might show you this up on the neckline in a second so you can see how it looks. You can obviously play around with the length of chain or adding further beads if you want to. Before I pop back up there, let's have a quick look and see who else is in. Joy is in. Hello to you too. Doreen is in from Coventry, CT. Is that also Connecticut? Not 100% sure, but Coventry, England is about 28 miles away from where I'm sitting right now. Diane is in from Connecticut, a little cold and windy. Colorado is Cynthia's home. Hello to you, my lovely. Jeanette is in. Hello to you. Where are you from? You're Puerto Rico in the house. Hello to you, my darlings. Now, one of these days I'm going to be able to say this. Adirondack Mountains? From Linda? Hello to you, my lovely. Sharon is in from upstate, sunny but cold. Same here, my love. Donna is in. Hello. Is the focal bead called Terra, Jasper? Yes, it is. Janisha is in from Ohio. Hello to you. Elaine is in from California, and Debbie is also in from Ohio. You have to reach out to each other and hang out sometime, maybe. Beady friends. Beady friends. I'm going to show you the soul of the ocean, and I promised Sarah that I wouldn't sing today, because when the name was first agreed, I kept thinking she said Heart of the Ocean and I was going to sing. But if you've ever heard me sing, it's 100% blessing that I'm not going to sing. So there is the soul of the ocean. Terra, Jasper, Aquamarine, we've got Amazonite, we've got Aquamarine, little Digi beads in the box as well. We've got blue lace, and we have gorgeous Angelite. If you've never seen Angelite as a gemstone before, some people refer to it as Angelite. You call it whatever you want to. It has a very different feel and texture to it than a lot of other gemstones. So something like agate takes a really beautiful high polish to it. You may refer to that as agate. It's whatever you want to call it, really. Agate, agate. Knock your socks off, you do you. Agate is very smooth when it's been polished, really, really sultry like glass or like a crystal bowl. Whereas Angelite has an almost waxen feel to it. It's complete magic to me how gemstones can have a similar colourway but be so completely different in how they feel and how they act. So Aquamarine is a really, really special gemstone. It's March's birthstone. My mum's birthday was in March, so I sometimes make aquamarine things. But this is Soul of the Ocean. The central section will spin. If you feel the urge to spin things when you are out and about and you need to just have something to play with, then that might be for you. You don't have to. It's not the law. I'm going to take this off and pop you back down to the board so you can have another look. Let me take it off first, otherwise you'll be looking at a board with nothing on it, and that will be boring. So there we go. I adore this clasp. It's the perfect clasp for this project. So I'm just going to pop that back down and take you there with me. There we go. So Terra Jasper, Aquamarine. This is the Angelite, a slightly waxen blue. We've got lots of crystals to work with. Now I like when you have got, there's a slightly darker blue and there's a slightly tealier, almost aquamarine, Santa Maria aquamarine colourway. I like randomly using them. So I've got a slightly darker one here, a lighter one here. On the far side, darker one at the top, lighter one next. If you want this to be completely symmetrical, you completely have control. You do exactly what it is you want. So you could have 2 dark ones down at the bottom and all light ones at the top. Entirely within your control. I just liked randomly using them. I've also used some of these clay rhinestone spacers and some gorgeous little cubes. We've got this almost milky opal type crystal rondelle to work with, and so many different saucer spacers. I love saucer spacers. I really, really love when they're textured. These are so cool. So this is the project we're going to make together today. So let's have a look. Who else is in the house? Kentucky is here. Hello to you, Misty. Hi, everyone from Fran. Debbie is there. Sun is out in Ohio. Lovely. I'm glad to hear it. Kelly says, gorgeous, thank you, my love. Elvie is in. Hello to you and all of us gathering together. Debbie is being very complimentary. Beautiful, love this necklace. Thank you so much. Mary is in. Hi, Jem. Excited about this class, my first with you. I'm excited to have you here, darling. And Donna says, hi, all. Let's get cracking, shall we? Let's get cracking. Beautiful, beautiful Terra Jasper. So we're going to make this spinning section first. Now, in this piece under... That's not even a word. I sometimes wonder about myself. I sometimes wonder. On the piece I have on the board in front of me, let me just bring that back down so you can keep looking if you need to. I've used the tiny rhinestone wheel spacers either side of the spinner, and that protects the gemstone from the ends of the wire where we're going to create wrapped loops. Now, what you can do if you want to is change up what spacer you use. So I think we might add in some slightly larger wheels today. But you could use these rhinestone. They're gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And they do go on the 18 gauge wire. So it does work. But I think today I'm going to use these. And then at the end of the class, you'll be able to see which kind of design you prefer. In fact, I think I prefer these, to be honest. So as ever, I'm going to be demonstrating for you in a copper colourway. The reason I make with silver is because I believe that's the colour of the wire that you've received, and it goes so beautifully with the blues. I demonstrate with copper because it shows up on the camera so much more beautifully. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to move this sidebar out of the way for now. Those are the bead selections that I've chosen for the sidebars of my necklace, but you've got so many choices to play with that you can completely go your own way. Let's get that one out of the way for now. We'll bring that back in later. So I think what I need to do is make myself a little bit of space. Let's pop the Soul of the Ocean up at the top and bring in some of that heavier gauge wire. Now, in the kit, you received 2 gauges of wire. 18 gauge in the UK, that's equivalent to 1mm gauge. And I have here around about 10 inches of that wire. This is the heavier wire again. So the first thing I'm going to do is just smooth that between thumb and forefinger to make sure that not only is it nice and fluid, but it's free of any kinks. So you can see there's a bit of a curve happening up at one end when your wire has travelled. My copper wire comes on these giant reels, absolutely massive, like £half pound, pound and £2 pound reels of wire. It can sometimes take a little bit of effort just to get that curvature out, but all I'm doing as you can see, very, very quickly is running between thumb and forefinger to get that to sit as smooth and neatly as possible. So I'm going to check that drill hole out. If you're new to working with gemstone beads, you may have been a Jessie James beads lover for a very long time. You may not have worked with a lot of gemstone beads. What I will say is, generally speaking, the drill hole you get in a gemstone bead is pretty poor. Today I'm working with amazing gemstone beads and metal and crystal. The supporting cast is as magnificent as the key player here. So I've sat my Terra Jasper circular. It's a coin bead, which means that it's kind of flat on both sides. Excuse me, I tripped over my own tongue. It's flat on both sides, but it has a nice smooth edge to it. It's not quite as flat as a coin would be on the side. It's been chamfered around a little bit. They're beautiful to work with, and I'm finding more recently I want to work with coin beads all the more. So you can see how much space we have in the drill hole down the centre. I've worked with some fairly terrible gems in the past in terms of the drill hole, so this is an absolute treat. I've just allowed my Terra Jasper to sit in the centre of my wire, and again that was around about 10 inches of the heavier, which is 18 gauge. Let me just check to see if there's any questions so far. Puerto Rico is in the Caribbean. Indeed it is, Puerto Rico. I've seen it on a map. One of my favourite singers is from Puerto Rico. I wonder if you can guess who that might be. Hello from Utah. Excited to be here. Excited to have you, Caroline. Hi from Barb. Love the necklace. Excited to be in the clasp. And thank you so much, my lovely. You're such a supportive friend. Beautiful necklace. Thank you. I've been working with Jessie James beads for about 6 years. Love them all. Debbie, you are so in the right. They're beautiful. What I want to do is to put a right angle bend coming up on both sides, and that's really just to give me a little bit of space to work with. Before I put those right angles on, I'm going to choose which spacers I want on either side of my focal bead. So I'm going to pop this one on and see what it looks like. I actually really like how that looks. I'm going to show you again in the original design that I used the teeny tiny wheels with rhinestones on. I'm going to bring that up closer to the camera. It will get blurry because it won't be in focus, but you can see which of the wheels I've used. They're the rhinestone wheel bead, or spacer if you prefer. I'll just pop those back out of the way before I send them flying. There we go. So I've popped my chosen spacers on either side. Now these have got massive apertures in the centre. So if you want something that sits a bit more snugly, you have got lots and lots of choices. It's my first time actually in this pack. You get these gorgeous donuts as well. They're beautiful. They would also work really beautifully on either side of that central spinning section. So you've got your Terra Jasper on and you've added a spacer bead of your choice on either side. So I'm just going to pinch that into position for a moment and pop in with my bent chain nose pliers. Now, if you don't have bent chain nose pliers, don't worry. I tend to use them because I can get underneath the project. You can still see what's happening. You can use any flat facing pliers. So I'm just going to push that down actually because it's easier to show you. And what I want to do is to allow a small gap between that bend and where my spacer bead sits. I'm going to flip this over the other way and just bring that back into position, pop my bent chain nose pliers underneath again, and I'm trying to hold it so that you can see what we're looking to get. If everything slides around, it doesn't matter, but what we're looking to achieve is a space either side of where those spacer beads sit that is similar. So to begin with, it doesn't really matter as long as you're allowing, let me just put that bend in, and then if I sit the beads down, you'll see that we have a gap between the spacer bead and the angle that we've created. Now, in terms of inches, it's about 1/8 of an inch, I want to say. Yeah, it's about 1/8 of an inch from the side of the spacer bead to that bend. In millimetres, that's about 4 millimetres, I would say. I've just realised I've got a big old cut on my hand. Sorry about that. I hope that is not in your eyesight. So we've made a bend on either side. I'm just going to pop back to the stream now to see if there are any questions thus far. Hello from Florida. Hello to you, Charlene. Hi, Jem, and all from Maria. Hello to you, sweetheart. So you can use, if you prefer, bail making pliers or round nose pliers for this next section of the design. So what I'm going to do is allow everything to slide over to one side. If that spacer moves, it doesn't matter. You can pop it back on. I'm just going to give that a bit of a hold and then create a circular form on the side just here. So I'm going to pop my round nose pliers into position and rotate them around like so. Small movements, and I'm just very gently opening and closing until I get a shepherd's crook on one side. Pop my pliers back into position, and I'm going to draw this up to the top like so. I'm going to repeat that on the opposite side. Now when I'm making a spinning bar, which is basically what we're creating, a bar in the centre of a necklace, I refer to these as bar necklaces, with chain or beaded segments coming away from the side, what I like to do is to ensure that if I'm taking my wire around in a circle and it passes over the top on one side, I want it to do the opposite on the other side, but to pass over the top. Does that make sense? I'm going to flip this over because I'm right dominant. It's easier for me to show you. So you can do this all in one move if you want. You can rotate that around so that you get that shepherd's crook shape. And then draw the wire. So we're looking for two reasonably similarly sized circular forms. If, as I have done, that's travelled a little bit further away than you want, you can pop your pliers into that round form and walk it round a little bit. Support the round form into position and re-straighten that line. Now at this stage, what I would like to do is add in a bar. Now this is going to be a little bit annoying in terms of meshing those two together and having this in the way. So what I'm going to do is leave this segment ready to add in later. So if you were going straight into the chain from your spinner, now would be the time to put the loop on. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like if you just wanted to make the central section without the beaded side bars. You just allow that to sit down before you close that loop up. But what we're going to do today, this is just an option. I always like to show you options because I want you to be able to create jewellery that is 100% just for you. If you wanted to add in a length of chain at this stage and beads further up, now would be the time to add in the chain. We're not going to worry about that because we're going to do a wrapped loop later. So let's pop that out of the way. So the next stage is to create this central section, allowing enough space between the coil we're about to create and the spacer bead to enable that central bead to spin if you should so desire. So to do this, we're going to create wrapped loops on both sides. If you've seen these a million times before, I'm very sorry, but I do want to show you them in case you are new to wire. What we're looking to do is to keep that Terra Jasper centralised on the bar. So I'm going to start off by supporting the circular frame on one side. I'm not pressing down where the wires cross over. And I'm going to take that tail all the way around. What I'm going to do is try and keep that as tight as possible on the one side and give maybe 2 wraps around the core that passes down through that Terra Jasper. I've slightly mangled the circular form there, and all I'm going to do to fix that is push it back down onto my round nose pliers so that it sits back where I want it to. You can also reframe it slightly by using the tips of a fine pair of flat facing pliers. So I've got 2 wraps on the one side, and the reason I'm doing one side a little bit of the way followed by the other side a little bit of the way is to ensure that I can end up with the same number of wraps on both sides. When you get the same number of wraps on both sides, you will centralise your focal bead. If you do 4 on one side and find you can only fit 3 on the other, of course you can undo it, but it tends to be a little bit tricky and you might mangle the whole thing. So again, I'm going to support the round form that we've created. And I'm going to take the tail around and match the number of wraps I've done on the first side. So I reckon we can get at least another 1.5 wraps on both sides. The key with a design like this is to go slowly, do it bit by bit, and in that way you'll end up with a nice neat piece which should meet your own aesthetic standards. So I've taken that for a 3rd wrap on the one side. I'm going to flip the design over. Again, I know I bore you silly by telling you that I'm right dominant, but the reason that I flip it over is because it's easier for me to show you rather than trying to do things left-handed and making an absolute sad job of it. So I've got 3 wraps on either side now, so I think maybe we'll go for another one. You just need to fill that and get your spacer beads to sit firmly but not hard up against that spinner bead. So let's take one more underneath, flip the design around, One more over the top. That looks pretty decent to me. Maybe go another half a section. Let's just try it on this side and see what that looks like. Take the tail over the top. We're looking to have the same number of wraps visible on both sides. Now you can see I've put a bit of a gap on this side. I'm just going to try and fix that by drawing the wire coils closer together. Because I've got a metal bead there, I can even use the metal spacer bead to push that over. So I'm going to flip it around until I get this to sit how I want it to. So I'm quite pleased with how this is looking. I think that's where I'm going to trim those tails away. So if I just flip this over to the back on this side, I'm going to trim away the tail of the wire. Pieces of wire, this is about 1.5 inches long, still very, very useful. So that goes into my scrap pot and I'll probably turn that into a coil later. Now what I do want to do is to make sure that the tail of the wire sits neatly down on the core that goes through the middle of that Terra Jasper. I'm going to do the other side and then I'm going to flip over to the comments to make sure that I'm not missing anything. So again, I've just trimmed away that tail, keeping that for later use. Tiny little coils make perfect charms to go on jewellery, on bracelets and such. So we've set our central Terra Jasper bead. Now these two large hole spaces are a bit floppy at the moment, but we're not going to worry about that because I'm going to be adding another layer of wire over the top, and that will, in a little moment, keep them in position. So that's what it will look like when it's finished. They're annoying and loose at the moment, but don't worry. So the bars are sitting out to the side. If I pop it down on the desk, you can see that they're flat to the desk, those little hoops. Let's have a look at the Facebook feed to see if there are any questions so far. Let's have a look. Any questions? I just love that Jasper bead, such a beautiful colour. It really, really is. Now, there were a couple of different types of Terra Jasper that came out. There was a slightly more turquoisey one, and there was this one, which was sort of purpley, inky, almost iolite colours. So whichever one you're working with, they are stunning. I love the markings. Will you publish this so I can save it for later? Have to leave to pick up children. Do not panic. You will be able to see this later on Facebook. So it will be there for you. Do not panic. Just pause me for now and come back later, my darling. Let's have a look. Easily distracted. I think the spinning centre, that's spinning all the... I can't see the original question there. So if you don't want the centre to spin, if that would be problematic for you, then you can simply take the wire end just that little bit closer and it will stop the bead from spinning. In my original design, if I hold this up, you can see that that bead is not spinning because it has tension against it from the tiny little rhinestone spacers. It only moves when I want it to. So it's all about tension with setting that central bead. If we want this to be very, very stationary, we can just add another half a coil on either side of that core wire. If you've already cut it and you still want it to be still, don't worry because we've got another piece of wire to add in a moment, which will also set that slightly more firmly. So we are again working with another length now of 18 gauge wire. As I mentioned before, I work in copper because it shows up better on the camera. Doesn't matter what colour you're working with, it's going to team beautifully with this Terra Jasper. This time I have about 10 or 12 inches of that 18 gauge wire, and I'm going to warm that through again. Whoops. Giving that a bit of a bend that I didn't want in it, but because I already started warming the wire, it really doesn't take much effort to get that back to where I wanted it to be. I just need to move some pliers out of the way for a moment. What I'm going to do is to start making this U shape or horseshoe shape to sit down underneath the bead, and I want that to be in the centre of my 10 to 12 inches of wire. Now what you can do if you want to is use a round form for this. I have happened to have to hand a pot of spacer beads, daisy spacer beads. It's larger than I want it to be, but I want to show you how easy it is to just use something that, even if it's not quite right, because I warmed that wire, warming the wire is literally the most important part of working with wire, I've been able to make that smaller. so that it fits where I want it to fit. So if you don't have anything that's perfect, if you don't have a mandrel that tapers, don't worry, you will be able to get that to sit how you want it to. So what we're going to do now is to sit this horseshoe shape so that it sits on the outside of those two spaces that are outside that Terra Jasper. So I'm just going to leave that there for a second, pop over and see if we have questions. If the large holes in the spaces are a little large, you can use a small bicone to fill the space. You could, but what I would say is, because I'm putting a little bit of pressure with the next move, if you think that the holes in the large spaces are too large, either use the rhinestone spacer that I used in the original design, or use a different metal bead. There's lots and lots of choices. So if I bring one of the highly textured spacers in, the hole in the centre of this one is much smaller, so that it won't move around quite as much. You've got so much choice in this kit that you'll find something that works for you. You could even use one of these fabulous little, it's like halfway between a saucer bead and a bead cap. I love those. I'm using that in a minute for something else, but you've got so many choices, you absolutely can. I would endeavour to use a metal bead though, because it will protect your Terra Jasper from the wire, which means that if you do want to spin it, you absolutely can. But you could, if you wanted to, use a 3 or 4 mil bicone to fill the space. Absolutely up to you, Teresa. No whackers whatsoever. So I have the U shape in the centre of my wire. Allowing that to harden for a second by not touching it is a good idea. What I'm going to do is sit that over the surface of the design, and what I'm looking for is a nice shape between the bead and the wire. I want some space there, I don't want it too tight. Now, because we did warm that wire, if we sit this and it goes slightly off to one side, don't worry, because we can just move that around a bit. What I want to do is to take the tail of that wire on the right hand side. Let me move this out of the way for a moment. I want to start wrapping that tail around the pre-wrapped core. So you remember we made a wrapped loop and then we went 3.5 or 4 times around with the wire before we cut it away. I want to now go over the top of that coil of wire. So I'm going to start forming that around. Little bit of control, slow and steady very much wins this kind of design. So I'm going to wrap that around until it sits where I want it to. So you can see that that's actually moved just slightly up from where I had originally set it, and that's good that it's done it, because it's something that might happen to you. If that does happen to you, you can very simply just reform the wire so that it sits equal and opposite on the other side. So we're going to trap that spacer bead, and then take the opposite side and wrap it around the core. So I've sat it over the front of that central bar that goes through the Terra Jasper, and I've wrapped it 3 times. I'm just going to ignore that for a second until I decide what I want to do with it, because I'm going to show you an alternative to these plain wraps in a moment. So for me, I'm going to flip this upside down, like so. We've still got that lovely horseshoe shape skirting around the outside of the Terra Jasper, and I'm going to push the wire down over the surface of that core wrap. So from top around to top, I'm going to pinch this very, very firmly and then bring that tail around and put some tension into it now, so that I've got the same situation on both sides. Now, just occasionally this will go out of shape. You can very easily use flat pliers just to bring that back in. For me, it hasn't changed, but if it does change, don't fear. You've got plenty of wire to work with. You can either unwrap it and start again, or very, very gently make small adjustments to make sure that that's exactly how you want it to. Now, in my original Soul of the Ocean design, I simply truncated the wraps, and all you would do is you'd go to whichever side you have decided is the back, truncate the wire and smooth it down. However, if you want a little coil over the top, I'll show you how to do that now. So I love to show you options of how things can be adapted to your own choices. What I want to do is to make sure that my wires end up in the same place on either side. So I'm just going to lift this up, make sure that everything is super neat and tidy, and draw that right hand wire up to the top. You can tighten those coils if you need to. So if I turn this on its side and just bring these tails of wire up for a second, If you want them to just be truncated, take the wire across the back and trim it. I'm going to show you now how to add a small coil though. So I'm trimming this to around about 1 inch. Again, this is a usable length of wire. Don't throw them away, save them for little coils, little charms. They're very, very useful for small designs like earrings where you just need a bar to put a few beads on. So these need to be the same length. If you want to, you can measure them or you can eyeball it like I am now. I'm just going to take the merest smidge away and get rid of that excess. So I am using Beadalon flush cutters. Honestly, one of the best purchases I've ever made as a jeweller. Well worth it. I love my flush cutters. What I'm going to do now is to turn a coil, and I think I'm going to turn it inwards. But to begin with, what we're going to do is to sit that up and away. So I'm going to bring those round nose pliers to the end of that excess wire, and I'm going to start by turning a circular form, and then I'm going to switch to some flat facing pliers, and I'm pushing in this direction, opening, closing and pushing. What I will do is I'll push that against my finger to create a nice fluid smooth coil. For now, what I'm going to do is to leave that coil sitting upwards so that it comes away and forwards from the design. This is because I'm going to add in a sidebar later, and if I drop my coil down now, that's going to make my life awkward. So I'm just going to leave that sitting up and away and do the exact same thing on the other side. So I'm just going to hold this into position and I'll make another coil, and then we're going to visit the comments to see if there are any questions. I'd much rather address the questions whilst we're here making together. So I've started making that circular form, and I'm now going to push the circular form into the forefinger of my non-dominant hand and just push and push until that coil sits on the central core. So it's just going to sit and face upwards for now. And we've got the main crux of our design ready now. So will it spin? Yes, it will. If you wear it against the body, it's not going to move anyway. So if you put that against your décolletage, that's not going to go anywhere anyway. So it shouldn't get on your nerves. But if you want to spin it, you absolutely can. Whee! Sorry about that, not very grown up. The next type of wire we're going to use is the finer gauge of the two that you received in your pack. This is 26 gauge, which is equivalent in the UK to 0.4mm. These two gauges, 18 and 26, I can make almost anything. The things I struggle to make with are tiaras, which need a slightly heavier wire, and I make shoulder jewellery for wedding days, which requires a much heavier wire. Also requires quite a sturdy body to carry them. So what we're going to do now is pop down to those comments. Let's have a gandaroo. Let's have a look. I always struggle to get a nice round coil. They seem to end up in an oval shape. Okay, let's address that. I've got a scrap piece of wire that I've literally just yoinked out of my scrap pot. What I'm going to do is get some heat and warmth into that. Garoline, you've got my number. I'll be spinning that thing. It's like I looked into your mind. So this is a scrap piece of wire. What you would probably be best doing is trimming that end to make it nice and flat, getting rid of the coarse section. I'm going to pop in with my round nose pliers. My round nose pliers are going very close to the tip of the wire, very close to the tip of those pliers. And it's small movements. I'm making small movements, opening and closing, just to get that first circular shape going. So it looks a little bit oval at the moment, but we're going to address that as we go. Switching to my flat facing pliers. So you could use chain nose pliers if you wanted to. You could use bent chain nose pliers, which I use. So I'm going to just grip that circular form. I'm going to push the circular form down into my finger, like so. And I'm making very, very small. It's barely 1/8 of a circle. If I've tilted it on its side, you should be able to see how this is forming. Opening and closing my pliers carefully but firmly means that I'm strengthening the coil as I'm making it. So I'm also going to show you what I do with my little scraps of wire. So I'm going to continue until I've got 3 passes of wire on this one. So 1, 2 and 3. I'm going to get to the end of that little section, put my pliers in at the very, very top, turn that into a right angle, And then I'm going to grip just above the right angle we just made, push that forwards. So you can see there's a tiny bit comes up and then it goes forwards. And then I'm going to make an open and closable loop just by rotating those round nose pliers around, bringing the tail over. It's quite a small section of wire to work with. So I've made a little loop up at the top, and I'm going to trim that where it crosses over at the neck, like so. That really is a scrap of wire, that'll go off to be melted. And I've now got an open and closable loop charm, but the point of that was to show you a way that you may be able to improve your coils. It's pressure into the non-dominant hand may help. So let's get back to it. Thanks for this little tip. You are very, very welcome. I have one, but can wait till later. You're the only person I've ever seen that does tutorials that warms their wire. What does it do? Does it make it more pliable? Comment has disappeared. Okay, running your thumb and forefinger over your section of wire 3 or 4 times. It excites the electrons in copper. I'm working with pure copper. Quite frequently you'll be working with a coated copper, so at the core it will be the same. When you get those little electrons all excited, you're warming it, you're making it much more soft and pliable. If you then ignore that for a couple of days, it will re-achieve a slightly harder state. If you hammer it, you can harden it, or if you nom it with flat-facing pliers, you can also harden it. This is a piece I was going to work with. I've just pre-hardened it. So there are ways that you can soften and harden your wire without getting the blowtorch out, or even putting it in a tumbler. Tumbling your wire jewellery will also harden it. Let me pop that back out of the way and get on with the next stage of our tutorial. Oh, that's so perfect. Oh, that's jolly decent of you, thank you. The kit has been available for around about a month. I'm sorry to hear it's been sold out, but perhaps if you hassle them, maybe, just maybe, you might be able to get parts for it. Honestly, if you can get some of these Terra Jaspers, whoa, you can enhance it with lots and lots of other Jessie James beads. Caroline says I need excited electrons in my life. That's genuinely hilarious. Donna says, I try to do those and it just sits and spins, it wheels, never curves into anything. Getting a good solid grip on your round nose pliers will help. I suffer from quite warm hands, which is why wire tends to do what it does for me. The next thing we're going to do is to add on some of these beads. Now I popped some of these into a little dish earlier so that they would be ready. What we're going to do is take around about 15 inches of your lighter wire. This is the 26 gauge wire. And I'm going to start by winding it on 3 times onto this little horseshoe shape. So it doesn't matter if you go from underneath or over the top. To begin with, we're just tying it around. What we're looking to do, and having a movable bead is helpful at this stage, what we're looking to do is to tie that at least 3 times with the cut end going upwards towards one of these coils. So that has wrapped around about 3 times, and I'm just going to make sure that that end section is smoothed down by popping my flat pliers over the surface and just rotating them around. That's actually more like 4 wraps, but never mind. So what we're going to do is scooch that coil up to the edge where we have one of our wrapped loops, and we're going to bring in our first bead. Now I chose on this instance to work with Angelite, but we might play around with this as we go. Actually, I might pick some different beads. Watching me put beads on wire is one of the least interesting things ever because my eyes aren't all that fabulous. Let's just pop back here a second. Any questions? Searching for Terra Jasper even as we speak. Good luck, my darling. I will speak to Sarah and see if there's any way that this can be made re-available at a later date. But we will always pre-advertise our Jessie James beads make-alongs as far in advance as possible. Anne has another class. Catch you later, babe. Take care. So we have wound on the horseshoe shape at least 3 times. I think it's 4 in this instance. And I'm sliding down that beautiful, gorgeous Angelite or Angelite bead into position. I'm going to push that bead against the horseshoe shape. Now, because my finer gauge wire has come from underneath, I need to grip the bead against the horseshoe, draw the wire down over the top. If your finer gauge wire comes over the top, you need to do that in reverse. Like I said, it really doesn't matter which way around you do it. What I'm doing is pushing the leading edge of wire through that hoop so that I can wrap, let's go for 4 times, let's go for 4 times because it will then match what we started with. I do like the number 3 in jewellery. So I've literally just circled 3 times, 4 times even, around the horseshoe shape of wire. And you'll see that at the moment we're still quite fluid. We've got movement. If you wanted the bead further up, take it further up. If you want it further down, take it further down. What I might do to make this less dull for you is do a fewer number of beads rather than 1, 2, 3, 4. Graduating up in size, I might do fewer, and what you can do at home is add more in if you prefer. The technique is exactly the same. I'm just going to talk for a minute whilst you decide how many beads you want to use. I'm going to bring in those extra beads and see what else there is. I might go actually for one of the Amazonites next. I love Amazonite. It is known as a gemstone of empowerment. So this is a beautiful faceted Amazonite. You can get Amazonite from all kinds of different places in the world. I love Peruvian Amazonite. So I'm going to sit those beads side by side. And again, my finer gauge wire is coming from underneath the horseshoe shape. So it then needs to travel over the top. So it's just swapping from one side to the other. I'm going to draw that sharply down so that the wire crosses over the top of the horseshoe. I'm going to push that leading edge through, and then I'm going to wrap 4 times in this instance. You could do whatever number you wanted, but you need to anchor on a minimum of 3 times. So we've gone for 4 times around and we've added a second bead. You can see what we're doing is creating a halo effect with other beads to sit around that horseshoe shape. So you would simply continue with that until you get almost to, if I put it back in its original orientation, almost to the 6 o'clock position. If you imagine that this is a clock face, this is the 6 o'clock, we started over here at the 3 o'clock, we're going to end up at the 9 o'clock. So when you get to the 6 o'clock, we're going to do a number of wraps, a good sort of maybe 8 or 10 wraps down at the base, just around the wire, before we start adding anything else in. So I think we'll add another bead for now. Let's go for one of these beautifully rich blue crystal beads. They're the same colour, I think. So that's the ones we're going to use now. And I'm going to zip line that down into position. As I said earlier, watching me put beads on things is really frustratingly dull because I'm not terribly good at seeing them. So you could graduate in colour, you could graduate in size, you could make them whichever way you want to. Angelite is another beauty. I love Amazonite too, says Linda. Garoline says, I can't wait for the day when I can wrap wire without feeling like I have 10 thumbs and no dominant hand. You are genuinely hilarious. I think I love you. So let's take the wire that's travelled underneath the horseshoe through the small bead, over the top of the wire, push that leading edge down, and then we're going to wrap a good 8 to 10 times down at the centre. Again, you can add as many beads on the one side as you want to before you hit that centre point. I'm just going to whiz around through this because I want to move on to the next stage of the tutorial with you. What you can do is get this central section set up and then we'll move on together to the next bit. You can simply add the second half of the beads a bit later. So I've only gone for 3. I'm just going to scooch those so that they sit down at the base. You can fill all the way from that 3 o'clock position if you like. What I want to do is to have the 6 o'clock position on my horseshoe shape completely filled with wire. You can even use this technique and spread those beads out. You don't have to have them sat shoulder to shoulder. Like so, I think we need another couple of turns of wire down here at the 6 o'clock. So I'm just going to whiz those through. Now, if you can't get that leading edge through, another technique is to take the tail of the wire, push it through, support the section of wire that's coming away from the horseshoe and draw that all the way through. When you get handier with wire, you will be able to ask it to do the leading edge maneuver for you and there won't be a problem at all. So what we need to do now is add in our next section. So you would simply repeat on the other side until you have added the same order of beads if you want to have symmetry. I went slightly asymmetric here with the colours because I kind of like to do that sometimes, but you can add whichever beads you want to. For the next segment, we're going to grab a scrap offcut of 18 gauge wire. This is about 5 inches in length. And what we're going to do is start by making a coil at one end. So we're going to practice that coil making again. I'm at the point in my short jewellery making career when I want to wrap every single bare piece of wire. Is that wrong? No, it's not wrong at all. There's a lot to be said for wrapping everything together, but I'm a huge believer in negative space in jewellery and in art as well. So one of the reasons I like to leave a gap between the gemstone and this horseshoe of wire is that you can see the skin through that. Doesn't matter what colour skin you are sporting, it's going to look beautiful with a design like this to allow that just to peek through. So if you want to fill every single section with wraps of wire, you absolutely can. Equally, if you want to have bare space, you can do that too. So we have, as I say, around about 4.5 to 5 inches, I guess, of scrap 18 gauge wire. And I'm going to start by making a double coil down at the bottom. So again, pliers at the very end of the wire, at the very tip of the pliers, we're going to turn until we get the start of a circular shape, and you can see my thumb is warming that wire as we're moving it around. I've got that circular shape to begin with. Patty says, you make things so clear that I might even be able to do it. Thank you so much. You're an absolute superstar. What a lovely thing to say. Thank you very, very much. I do hope that you have a go and that you enjoy the project. So what I'm going to do is make sure that my coil is flat. So very, very simply, flat sides of my pliers, make that flat, and then I'm going to do this on its side this time, using the side of my finger to support, just so that you can see how coiling works neatly. So I've wrapped once around, twice around. As I get to the point where I've made that second circuit of wire, I'm going to pop in with my bent chain nose pliers and just grip that coil and open it up so that the centre of my wire, it looks a bit like a lollipop. Maybe I'm hungry. Maybe I need some sugar. So it looks like the centre of that wire is going through the centre of the coil we've created. So if I flip this up the other way now, I'm going to add in one of those funky, kind of like a saucer spacer, but also kind of like a bead cap. And then I'm going to grab one of these absolutely astounding, they must be coated. They must be coated in something because they are astonishingly beautiful. Huge aquamarine. Aquamarine is a member of the beryl family. Beautiful gemstone, absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to take another one of those similar bead caps and pop it over the top. Now, you don't have to use the nugget here. You could use any of the fancy beads. You could even add in... Oh, there goes a piece of paper with my crib notes on. Never mind. That was to remind me what sizes the gemstones were. That's my awful, awful writing. So what I'm going to do is make an open and closable loop up at the top. So I'm going to push the bead cap down against the top of the bead. And I'm going to push forwards to create a right angle. Now, if you wanted to have a wrapped loop, you could use the exact same technique we used earlier at either side of that Terra Jasper central spinner. I'm going to make an open and closable loop. So I'm just going to run that round nose plier around and then draw the tail of wire around at the back to get me that round form. Now, because this is an open and closable loop, what I always do is give that such a squish. Just opening and closing my flat facing pliers, really, really squishy, squishy, to make sure that that is firm in its final position. And then I'm going to trim away at the point that it crosses over itself. Get that to sit super neat and tidy, like so. And then I'm going to open that up sideways like it's a jump ring and add it on to that central section. So I'm just going to hold that over the top of that wrapped 6 o'clock segment before I flip it over. And then I'm just going to close that loop up. Now, as I say, you can do a wrapped loop. What happens when I do a wrapped loop on something like this on screen, as you're seeing it now, is everything jumbles together and it's very tricky to see what I do. So we watched together earlier as I made a wrapped loop, so you could do that if you wanted to. And you can see that that sits in the centre at the 6 o'clock position. You can then add in whichever beads you want to on the other side. Now, to create the bar that sits on the side, let's get this heart out of the way. Quick drop down to Facebook for questions. I love all of your tutorials. You explain so well. Now I just need to accomplish it. Practice, my darling. practice and you will find something that you enjoy. Patty says you're very welcome. I appreciate the comments, I do. Beautiful colour, says Clarice. They are, they're gorgeous. Garoline says, I see those breathtaking pieces you've made and I think I might run out of years of life. You're right, maybe don't shoot for wrapping every piece of bare wire. I know what you mean. What you'll find is it's all about the same as life. Pick your battles. Sometimes leaving the wire bare may make you feel like you haven't accomplished everything, but when you see the complete piece, you might think, actually, I'm really glad that I did that. And then there's always another piece of jewellery. At the end of the day, if you make this and it doesn't meet up to what your expectations were, you've got enough wire to give it another go. You can cut off pieces or start from the beginning. The video will be here for you. It will be there for you for good, so you can check back and have another go if you need to. So I'm just going to leave that over to one side for a second, and what we're going to do is create a bar. So let me scooch that over. Very nice, love the colour. It's a beautiful colour, it's absolutely stunning. Your skill at jewellery making is phenomenal, but your ability to teach your skills is extraordinary. Oh my gosh, I might just blush. Best of all is your sense of humour. I'm well known for my sense of humour, and it's not always, you know, in a good way. Sometimes it can be inappropriate, but we're not going to go there today. Thank you for hanging out with me today with this make-along for the Soul of the Ocean. And I still haven't sung, so Sarah will be proud of me. I was going to, but then I thought, no, I will ruin all of your ears. I really appreciate the feedback that you give me, and yeah, thank you. Big love. Let's get back to making the next segment of our Soul of the Ocean necklace. I'll show you how to make that bar. So this is what we're going to do next. We're going to wrap in at one end a section of chain, and then at the other end we're going to leave a circular form so that we can add it onto the side here. So let me just pop this one out of the way for now. I'm going to pop down with another section of 18 gauge. This is only about 9 or 10 inches in length. If you imagine, the finished piece is probably about 4 inches from here to here. If you allow an inch at each end to create a nice, neat wrap, that's more than you need, but that's what I tend to allow. Allow an inch at each end to create a wrapped loop. Then you've got enough to play around with in case things go wrong, because sometimes they do. And, you know, that's all part and parcel of learning to love jewellery making. So I'm going to grip this section of wire. This is about 10 inches, so it's a little bit longer than I need, but it's what I have available. Smoothing that between thumb and forefinger 3 or 4 times. It's now lovely and straight, lovely and smooth, and lovely and warm, and it will work for us much more nicely. Debbie says, I love to work with wire. I get so many great ideas from watching you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Oh, I love you guys. You're the best. Maria says, you truly are a gem. Ah, I will blush before the end of the day. Thanks, my darlings. So what I'm going to do is take about 1 inch to 1.5 inches from one end and pop a right angle bend on. Because we added extra, we've got enough space here to kind of play around with and not be stressed by anything. First thing that I'm going to do is to create another wrapped loop into the second section of chain, which I temporarily lost for a hot minute, but I have just refound it. Happy days. So around shepherd's crook, put those round nose pliers back in, draw that tail over the top. The more you make, the quicker they get. Now the chain that we have here is absolutely fabulous because the loop holes that sit between each of these beautiful, I don't know what they are, but they're faceted and sparkly. The loop fits perfectly on 1mm. So we're going to slide that into position first, squish that down so that it's flat, and then we're just going to do a very simple wrapped loop. So again, when you're adding in a wrapped loop that has something on either side, so on one side we have the core of our wire that we're going to add beads onto, and then we've got a tail of wire crossing over it, so core and tail. We do not want to press down on those. On this side we have a delicate loop adding into our chain. We do not want to squish that. So what we're doing is we're taking a fine tapered pliers. You could, if you wished to, use your chain nose pliers. I just tend to use the bent chain nose ones. And we're going to support across that circular form, push the wire around, and I'm going to give that a couple of turns until it matches the other piece that I prepared earlier, which I think was 2 turns. I wasn't looking as I was doing that, I was looking for the other piece of wire. So it's got a bit baggy. What you can do is just gently coerce that back into position. If your wires open up, you can squish them back down. What you'll notice here is I have one side of my pliers above the wire, one side below, and diagonally you can contract those together and you end up with a slightly neater finish. I might take that one more time over the top actually. We can always add another wrap on the other side because it's not finished yet. So I've added my chain in at one end. What we now need to do is add the reverse order of beads as we have on this side, because what we're trying to do is to match. So I gave you a bit of a heads up earlier if you wanted to physically make along with me today of what your bead order is. I'm now going to try and find the correct pot of beads to bring in. Is it this one? Yes, it is. So I use 3 different saucer spaces on this. I'm just going to flip this out of the way. And you'll see why I don't tend to spend a lot of time putting beads on wire, because it's painful to watch, to be quite honest. So my next is the middle-sized textured saucer spacer. And then I'm going for the lighter of the 2 blues on the crystal rondelles. And then I'm going for possibly my favourite textured. It almost looks like a sand dollar. Love these so much. And the dark points make it perfect. I've then got one of these opalescent or a milky opal style faceted rondelle crystal, then another sand dollar, another milky faceted rondelle, before we hit one of these gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous aquamarines, which again, having an aquamarine that will fit onto a 1mm or 18 gauge wire is a boon. It's really cool. And then these are so awesome. I love having a lot of metal in my designs. Obviously I work with wire, but still. So what we need to do before we connect everything together is try and make things as symmetrical as possible. So I'm just going to drop these down for a second and see what we've got to work with. So if I just push those beads side by side, you can see that the wire is around about the same length. When you have a nugget bead, like these aquamarines, they may not be exactly the same size, but you've got a couple to choose from, so you can pair match them as best as you can. So I've got 2 coils of wire at both ends here. I'm just going to pop back to Facebook for a hot second to see if there are questions. What kind of wire do you use? Is it dead soft? It's raw, so it's minuscule amount of hardness, harder than dead soft. It's soft. Oh, thank you, Garoline. That's really kind of you. Thank you. There is a niche for assistant beaders, sous beaders. Yes, I've been a sous chef as well in my life, so happy days. So what I want to do is to try and replicate these 2 halves as much as possible. So because I haven't put a bend in on this wire, what I'm going to do is finish this side off first. If you prepare them side by side, you stand a much better chance of getting 2 identical sidebars. So I'm going to trim this one away first because it's easier to do because the end is coiled around. So I bring that back into position, trim away, almost cut the wrong wire. Please do look twice, then you'll cut once and then nobody will cry. I might have cried if I'd cut the wrong wire there. So just going to tidy that little end away. You can see it's ever so slightly lifted. So what I want to do is just draw that up and over the top. And I'm just opening and closing and rotating those pliers around the core. So hopefully that makes sense. And then at the other end, what we need to do is either add directly into the... That's the wrong end, you silly woman. What we need to do is to connect these 2 items together. Now you can do a very, very simple open and close with a jump ring if you want. But one of the things I wanted to show you today is how to add extra length to your designs. So that's not the bead that I used, is it? Hold on, here we go. I've got a spare one over here. There it is. I put the hearts out of the way so I wouldn't knock them on the floor, and now I can't reach them. That's classic Jem, that is. You know those little sections of wire that we had earlier on that were put in the scrap pot? This is about 1 3/4 to 2 inches of 18 gauge wire. I'm going to use that to make a small extender bar. Jem, you've done everything. You shred, you cook, you make gorgeous jewellery. Love it. Oh, bless you. Didn't say I shredded well. My guitar playing is fairly poor. Let's just be honest. I don't practice. And what I'm going to do is about 3/4 of an inch from one end, I'm going to turn a right angle bend. I appreciate that the desk is messy right now, so I'm just going to take some of these things out of the way so that we can see exactly the section we're concentrating on. Let's just leave that over there for a hot minute. So it's basically a wrapped loop again. So we're going to add in half circle, take the tail over the top. Now it's a very stubby section of wire that we have available, which is not a problem. What I'm going to do is just open that out like so, pop that through the loop of our chain, and then if I just show you that from above for a second, you can see that's quite open. So by hand, I'm just going to squash that down so that the two wires cross over. What you'll also see, which is good, I love it when mistakes happen because it allows me to help you in case this happens to you. So you can see that my loop is scooching over on the right hand side. I want that centralised. So I'm just going to tilt the wire until that centralises on the bottom of that straight line. And again, at this stage, having a couple of extra fingers down at the bottom is handy. You can use a handy extra helper if you have one. Or you can just pull that down out of the way, support across that loop, take the tail around. Now we're using a scrap of wire. Let me grab a second pair of pliers. If your fingertips are sensitive, you may prefer to use a second set of pliers. So you can see I'm gripping across the centre of the circular shape, like so. And I'm going to bring that tail of wire around with the other set of pliers. And we don't need a huge amount of wire here. It's a great way to use up scraps. And again, I'm opening and closing the pliers and rotating them around that core so that it sits smoothly. What we're going to do now is add in our spacer bead. Allow that to sit all the way down before popping those pliers underneath. And I'm estimating the gap between the loop and the coil. Probably a little bit more wire there than I need. Pushing up a right angle bend like so. Round nose pliers again to create a wrapped loop all the way around. Now you can see that I've absolutely massacred that. It's terrible. But we're just going to give that a few seconds of time. And pretty quickly that's come back into a recognisable shape. I'm going to open that up slightly, pop my finding in the end, and just squish that down into the hole. Bring the wire back around. Now if you're unable to get pliers in there because you have a chunky finding, let's just move this over to this side now, you may need to just grip hold of this by hand. It's entirely up to you. So I'm just going to draw the tail of the wire around now, over the top, push it around by hand until I have a second wrap. I'm going to give that a bit of a squish and a squeeze, push that over the top, and then trim away the excess. Now I have slightly mashed that, but let's just take that tail away. That one's for melting. What we're going to do is squish and squeeze this until it makes us happy. At the end of the day, that was a scrap piece of wire, and if you've wasted it, well, you know, potentially you could have put it on the floor or sent it into the bin anyway. So keeping scraps is handy for practicing with. So the very final part of the tutorial, you would do the same on the other side, obviously, with the other end of the finding. So you need one on one side, one on the other side. It's not that end, is it? I've done the exact same thing again. So you've got another spacer, same technique as we've just practiced together in here. So I'm going to pop that back out of the way. You're simply repeating what you've done on one side on the other side. So what I'm going to do now is draw the whole thing together. So what we've created is a link to the chain from the finding, or from the toggle and bar. The chain has been connected to the bar section. The bar section now needs to connect to the centerpiece. It's like building a tent. The instructions: take pole A. Are there any questions at this stage? No further questions. That's amazing. Happy days. So what I'm going to do is take the open loop, pop that through the very first wrapped loop that we made, get that to sit into position. And this may be a 2 pair of pliers job if you prefer. Again, we're supporting across that wrapped loop, not where we're squashing anything. I'm going to take that tail all the way around and fill that gap. So push, push, push. We've got 2 wraps here. 2 wraps is perfect because it's very similar to the number of wraps we have at the other end. We just need to neaten that last little bit up. Squish that tail until it sits out of the way. The final thing that you will do, well, there are 2 final things, beg pardon. Obviously you would have done exactly the same on the other side, so you've got your second bar, your second chain, you'll have the other toggle in position with that other little spacer bead. So we've repeated on both sides. What we're going to do now, we've added our wrapped loop in. Do you remember the loop, the coil that we made? What you can do is sit that over the surface of the very first wrap loop that we made. And what you're doing here is a bit like magic because you're hiding one of the links in the whole project, which makes it sit almost like magic. It's just suspended, which I really, really like. What you could do if you don't want the coils, not everybody wants coils on everything. As we discussed earlier, if we flip this over to the back, you just cut that wire away neatly so that it doesn't sit up like so. When I add the second bar in, I'll flop that side down as well. The very last thing that you will do is bend your bar into position. So very, very gently, we're just going to put a little bit of curvature in the wire. The reason I do this after the beads are loaded is because it gives me a nice opportunity to just assess everything. I'm going to take the piece that we've made together out of the way now, off from display, and show you the complete original piece, so that you can see all of the fine details if you need to. So like I said, you just repeat on the other side what we did on the one side. So I've got my 2 spacers with a lovely little rosary link, essentially, to draw the end of the chain into the feature clasp at the back. You've got your length of chain, wrapped loop after wrapped loop, and then you've got this curvature, because when it sits down on the body, it just looks so much prettier when there is a very gentle curve. What you'll notice is it's a very subtle, very small quadrant, very small part of a circle. It's not terribly bendy. That is your soul of the ocean. Let's pop back up to me. I might pop that on one last time so that you can see what that looks like. If there are any questions, obviously I will do my best to catch up with you and just kind of address anything that I haven't already addressed. You could use shorter sections of chain. Wow, I went for the word length and it came out as lane. Length of chain. So you could have that sitting much higher, like so. And then you've got chain left over to make earrings with, which is always a bonus. And you've got so many more beads as well. This is everything else that I have in the pot. Lots of delicious blues and oceanic vibes to work with. I'm going to pop back onto the questions for a second and just see if there are any. Love the coil technique. Now that I can do... Yep, that I can do. I see instructions. I struggle to make toast. You're hilarious. No questions means you've done your job. Thank you very much for that. Beautiful. Thank you for a fantastic class. Very informative. Have a great weekend. Very pretty. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for getting involved with the beautiful soul of the ocean. I know we've overrun by 12 minutes, but I do like to be thorough. We have maybe 50 places left on Beads and Bloom if you fancy that in the first week of May, I want to say. Have a bit of a look into that. If you've enjoyed today's class, I will be teaching 2 classes on Beads and Blooms. Now, if I could remember what dates it ran from and to, I would tell you, but I actually can't. You'll find the details anyway. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I've had an absolute blast with you all. I'll check back on the comments, see if there are any further questions, but enjoy your soul of the ocean. Made a whole class without singing. Happy, happy days. Take care, my darlings, and I'll see you next week. Mwah. Bye.